Good morning, Year 7. So today we're going to carry on with our topic on sexual reproduction with talking about fertilization and then pregnancy. So we're kind of going from having talked just generally about the structure of the reproductive system, so you've got your old male reproductive system, your female reproductive system, and having gone into a little bit of detail on the female reproductive system, talking about the menstrual cycle and how that works. We're going to talk now more about practicalities of getting pregnant and being pregnant. Okay? Now, we're still not going to go into any of the actual relationship stuff or any of that. We're still in the biology of sex, but we're going to talk specifically about what happens once sperm meets egg. So, 5 questions here. I'd just like you to write the answers at the back of your books. You need to pause me and just write the answers. Right. Function of testes. Function of the testes is to produce sperm, not to store sperm, to produce sperm. The function of the nucleus, it controls the cell, it stores the DNA. Okay, you can say either, I don't mind. An oviduct is a tube leading from the ovary to the uterus. The female gamete is called an egg, and name one special adaptation that sperm have to enable them to perform a function. Well, there are loads. They have streamline heads. They have lots of mitochondria to release energy. They have a tail, which can enable them to swim. They have an acrosome, which has enzymes in it to burn through the outside of the egg. That kind of an idea. There are loads. Fine, let's move on. Now, actually, I'm going to skip this bit. I think we kind of got this point. Right, so here's the point. Do not write this down. Instantly, this is not something I need you to write down. Firstly, the sperm is the smallest cell in the human body. It's incredibly small compared to an egg, which is about 30 times bigger and is the biggest possible cell. Now, we kind of touched on this already. We already drew the structure of sperm and egg. So as I say, we don't need to focus on that right now, assuming you understand what is happening, that is a big cell and that is a small cell. Right? Obviously, the pictures are different sizes. Fine. Now, a point we haven't really touched on very much is that sperm and egg have half the normal amount of DNA. Now, we have not talked much about DNA during the course of this topic or during the course of this year. But very broadly, DNA is just the recipe for making the proteins that make you. So my DNA is used by my cells as a recipe. They read along the DNA and it enables them to create the right proteins to make me. So the reason my eyes are brown is because I have a brown protein in my eye. The reason your eyes might be blue or green or whatever your colour your eyes are is because you have slightly different DNA to me. It's a different recipe, makes different proteins. But broadly, your DNA makes, at the very least, your physical structure and a lot of your emotional and mental structures as well. Now, DNA is made into chromosomes, which are just big bits of DNA. Okay, if you want to think of it as a recipe, these are just the pages of the recipe book. The chromosomes are big bits of DNA. All right, and usually you have 46. Now, again, I don't really need you to know that per se, really, though you will need to know it at some point in the course of the year. So it's not worth, you may as well remember it. You have 46 chromosomes, 46 big bits of DNA. So if I took one of your cells out of your face, your eye, your toenails, your toes at least, you would have 46 chromosomes in there, 46 bits of DNA. But each sperm and egg only have 23 each. I'm sure you can immediately start to think of why that would be. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Can you please take these notes down? These ones are ones you do need to know, and no, you don't need to draw the diagram. That's completely irrelevant. Hopefully you paused me. Pause me if you didn't. We'll move on. Now, 250 million sperm, we've talked about this already, 250 million sperm are released into the vagina during sex. Okay, so the sperm swims to meet the egg, but only one gets to fertilise it. And the point we're making here is you've got a 1 in 250 million chance, and the other point is that they meet in the oviduct, or the fallopian tube. We've talked about this before, I'm not going to dwell on it, but they do not meet in the uterus. It's a very important and common misconception. Right, if you're going to understand how pregnancy works, you have to understand that point. Now what's going to happen, or don't bother writing that incidentally, this one, because you already know this, you should already know this. What's going to happen is that the 23 chromosomes from the sperm will meet the 23 chromosomes from the egg, they will join together, and you will have 46 chromosomes, which is the normal amount. So you'll end up with one cell with the correct amount of DNA. That's why the sperm and egg each have to have half. They're two pieces of a puzzle. They join together, they make one cell. We'll talk about what happens to that one cell in a minute. Now, can you, do write this down. This I do want you to write down. So pause me. And let's move on. Now, they meet in the egg and the oviduct and they fuse together. Now, to be honest with you, pretty much what you just wrote. I don't really need you to write that down. Now, there's two questions there that I want you to think about and have an answer in your mind. Which has to travel further, sperm or egg? Where is the egg actually trying to get to? What's the point here? Where is the egg trying to end up? I'll give you 30 seconds, just think about this, pause me. Okay, which has to travel further, sperm and egg? Sperm or egg? I hope everyone thinks sperm. If you look at this diagram of the female reproductive system, they meet here. This is where the sperm is meeting the egg. You can see my little mouse moving around. You can see the sperm and the egg, they're joining together. Now that's not to scale because that sperm looks about the same size as the egg. In reality, the sperm is 30 times smaller. Now, sperm and egg meet there. And here is where the eggs are made and stored in the ovary. So the egg travels this distance here. Right? On my screen, it's about 2 centimeters. The sperm is released in the vagina. So even if we remove all of the travelling it's done from the testes to the vesicle where it's stored, down the penis, coming out into the vagina, even if we just start in the vagina, the sperm then has to swim through the cervix, into the uterus, up through the uterus, then down this fallopian tube, this oviduct, all the way to here. To me, that's more like 20 centimetres. It's about 10 times as far. It's a very large distance for a sperm. Where does the egg eventually want to get to? It wants to get to the uterus. So assuming the egg is fertilised, there won't be a menstrual cycle this month, there won't be any bleeding, there won't be a period, there won't be anything. The egg will stay alive, supported by other cells, and it will just roll its way along here. It's actually being pushed along by some hairs called cilia. And it's going to roll its way along here, and it's going to end up getting stuck in the wall of the uterus. Now, we have to understand fertilisation. So I want you to have a look at this. I want you to figure out which order it goes in, and I want you to write out these notes. Okay, this kind of joins together two different lessons we've done. The first one on reproductive systems, and this one on fertilisation. So write out these notes, please, in the correct order. These are not in the correct order. Write them in the correct order. Pause me again. Fine. Now, there's a couple of ways you might think to order this. Okay, so the first thing is sperm is always released first. Okay, the sperm has to swim for up to a day before it reaches the egg. The egg only survives for a day, and so they might be released at roughly the same times. But generally, the sperms can be released first. Now, if you put C then A, I'm not fussed. They're released about the same time. Doesn't matter whether you know the sperm's released first then egg. But it should be A, sperm is released from testicles, mixed with fluid from glands, and deposited in the vagina during sex. Okay, and that's the whole point of sex biologically, is to put sperm inside the vagina. Sperm, the egg is released from the ovary and makes its way down the oviduct. Is the second one. A, then C. Then the sperm swims to the egg and uses enzymes to eat through the outside. Then the outside of the egg hardens to prevent more than one sperm entering. And then E, the DNA from the sperm mingles with the DNA from the egg to create a full and adult set of chromosomes. Fine. We might come back to this if we get time. We'll do these questions later, I think. Right. Now, once that's happened, we kind of need to move on and we need to talk about what's going to happen next. So sperm has met egg. They join together into one single cell. What happens next? And what happens next is the woman will become pregnant, assuming that the cell survives. Now, quite a fair percentage of the time, the cell does not survive due to various issues, and sometimes even once the baby's been growing quite a long time, it doesn't survive, and that's called a miscarriage. But for the purposes of this lesson, we're going to talk about when pregnancy goes right, when pregnancy creates a baby. And so we're going to work our way from the cell to the baby. Now this is the longest task by a long way, but I need you to open up the sheet that was attached to your assignment, and if it wasn't attached to your assignment, mention it to your teacher on Teams, on pregnancy and fetal development. So let me pull this sheet up and I'll show you what we're doing. So here's the sheet. And what you have here is 11 boxes, 11 stages of pregnancy, starting actually from the beginning, sperm released, and going all the way to the end, baby born, okay, baby being born, right? So we're going to look at the different stages. Now a lot of this is kind of self-explanatory, and I'm going to ask you to do this without me talking you through it. It's trying to get you to think about it. Now I'm going to say we are going to start with this weird picture of these kids having fun in 90s clothes. It's quite an old picture, quite an old sheet this, that's why they've all got baseball caps and 2 large shirts on. Now you're going to start with that one and you can move on from there. Now there's a couple of different orders these can go in. What I really need you to do is, if you have a printer, I need you to print this off, I need you to cut it out, I need you to stick it in the right order. And again, this would be by far the easiest way to do it. If you have a printer to hand, just print it off. Get your parents' permission to use their ink, obviously, but it'll be easier that way. And that's the way I would do it in school. A little bit more difficult if you don't have a printer, still easily doable. You've got 2 options if you don't have a printer. Either, what you can do is you can find your print screen button. You can click print screen, which I've just done. You can then open up a Word document, which I will do now. Let's just click a new Word document. And you can then do that. And what that's done is got a picture of me talking to a screen. You can then crop this down and cut out all the different images with a crop function, like this. And then you can order them in the correct order on a Word document. That's just using the print screen button. What the print screen does is it takes a picture of the screen you're looking at, and then you can paste that into a Word document. So I've just created one of my pictures there, and I'd just do that with all of them, and I could just create myself a list of those. Print screen is the button you want. That's another thing you could do, or you could draw it out, and that's a lot more difficult and take you a long time. I don't recommend that. If you like drawing, if you want to spend some time on it, you want to create a nice little diagram, go for it. You're welcome to. I just think it's going to take you a long time to draw all of this. If you are going to draw it out very simplistically. Do I need these extra layers of the uterus? Probably not. Probably could just be a triangle with some extra layers around it. Right, fine. Either way, whatever you do, whichever way you do it, I need these cut out or drawn out and stuck in the correct order. Now I anticipate this taking you between 10 and 15 minutes. Shouldn't take you too much longer than that. I would hope it wouldn't take you much longer than that in lesson. We will see how it goes. So pause me, and I'm going to go through the order you should have got. Again, please just do it. If you get it wrong, you can reorder it. If you don't want to stick it down, if you want to leave it unstuck, at the very least put it in the right order. At the very least think about it, rather than just wait for me to give you the answers. Okay. Right, 10 minutes later, hopefully, you have got them at the very least in the right order, if not stuck down. So, my first one I said is the life for everyone begins with sperm and an egg. The sperm comes from the father, the egg comes from the mother. Alright? Now, I'm going to then say a sperm is a lot smaller than an egg. Sperm are made in a man's testes, and the egg is made in a woman's ovary. It's about half the size of a grain of salt. Alright? I'm going to put them in that order. But you can put egg and then sperm instead, doesn't matter. Alright? Sperm, egg, sperm, doesn't matter. Alright. Then we have one sperm can join the egg. This is called fertilisation. The sperm and egg together contain all the information to make a new person. So we've kind of skipped over the whole sperm being deposited in the vagina, swimming through the uterus, all of that stuff. We've just jumped straight to fertilisation. Because the point of this sheet is to talk about pregnancy, not fertilisation. Fine. Then we've got the fertilised egg starts to divide and grow. Now, what happens with cells is they naturally divide. So if I was to accidentally cut myself, let's say on a piece of glass, broken glass, I don't know, accidentally cause myself a little scratch, what happens is my cells start to divide. They break into two pieces and they divide and they grow and they divide and they grow to create more cells to cover over my scratch. Same thing here. If I start off with one cell, what then happens is that one cell gets bigger and bigger and bigger and then divides into two. Those two cells get bigger and bigger and bigger and then divide into 4. And then into 8, and then into 16, and 32, and 64. And what happens is that keeps going until you've got ridiculously large numbers of cells like I found in you. But the first stage is here, the fertilised egg starts to divide and grow. And it takes about a week to get to the uterus. And in that time it divides and it grows and it divides and it grows and it divides and it grows, and you have hundreds of cells. Hundreds and hundreds, possibly thousands. Give me a sec, I'll find out. Yeah, I was wrong. It's 2 to 300, apparently. Just googled it while I paused you. Fine. So 2 to 300 cells at this point can attach onto the side of the uterus. Right. Once it's attached onto the side of the uterus, that's its happy time. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a second when we leave this sheet behind. But broadly, in there, what's going to happen is that the cells are going to divide and grow, and the cells are going to start taking on their own little habits. So some of them are going to become bones, some of them are going to become nerves, some skin, and we're going to create something that looks a bit like this. Now, an interesting fact is that pretty much every different animal has this kind of shape at a few weeks. So a fish, monkey, rabbits, literally birds, they all have this weird kind of a shape. And this is one of the things that makes scientists think that we might all have evolved from one creature, is because we all have the same shape in the womb at 4 weeks. Now, after 7 weeks, we're looking like a very, very tiny, tiny human. Now, it's worth noting this tiny human here will be the size of a blueberry. Excuse me. So very, very small, very, very small. But it's humanish at this point. And pretty much all that happens from then on is just growth, lots of growth. So we're going to have fingers and toes growing is the next one after three months. Your brain's going to be getting bigger, your bones will be elongating, intestines and heart and all this stuff will be forming properly. And by 9 months, you look like this. So hopefully it's going to be head down. If you are foot down, that's called breech. That causes more difficulties because your head is the heaviest part of you. So you want your head going to be pushing down. You can also get stuck if you're not careful. Your head's kind of cone shaped when you're born, as it gets forced through the vagina. That helps it to get through. If your foot, not so much, and also if you're pulling from below, your neck can get stuck. So all things considered, we'd prefer the baby to have its head down. And the uterus is made of layers of muscle. Layers of muscle that push downwards and inwards, like a toothpaste squeezing downwards. And this forces the baby's head through the vagina and out into the outside world. Now, you may think, how is a baby going to fit out of what is a very small tube? The thing with that is that the vagina is very, very, very flexible, capable of stretching quite a lot. Now, it can be very uncomfortable for women. In fact, it is uncomfortable for women, full stop. But it is doable because of this amazing biology of the vagina that allows it to stretch massively. It's also worth noting that women's pelvises are different to men's, so that they have a larger gap in them around that area for the baby's head to get through. And they also release chemicals into their body which cause all their ligaments and tendons to get a bit floppy and elastic, so that all their bones can stretch out further than they would usually be able to. So a woman's whole body changes during pregnancy, and it can cause all kinds of issues for the woman, but it's all to enable this baby to be pushed out. Now, let's go through the order one more time. From the top, you've got human, sperm, egg, or human egg sperm, I don't care. then fertilisation, sperm meets egg, then fertilised egg divides and grows, then embryo gets attached to the inside of the uterus. Incidentally, some people have asked me embryo versus fetus, what's the difference? An embryo is a ball of cells that's going to eventually become a baby. A fetus is about 11 weeks old. So an embryo becomes a fetus, 11 weeks old in the womb. So you're looking at something around the 3-month mark at that point. Fine. So we've got, people, sperm, egg, fertilisation, growth, embryo attaches. Then you've got 4 weeks, 7 weeks, 3 months, 9 months, birth. Nice and easy. That took quite a long time, I know. So let's move on very quickly to the last little bit of this lesson. So, by now, hopefully, you feel like you're starting to get an idea of, firstly, what's happening at fertilisation, sperm meets egg, and secondly, how we're going to get a baby out of that, with this cell division and growth. Now, I wanted to show you one image which kind of demonstrates the sizes of babies at various times. And it's this one. So, hopefully we can all see this. Now, it's a bit of jokery, a man's guide to baby sizes, but I thought this was actually quite a good one. So you're looking at various sizes here. So remember when we were talking about the week 7 looking almost like a human? It's about the size of a 5p coin. Okay, and even once the baby is born, it's only just bigger than a large rugby ball. They're very small. And you can see throughout the point here, you've got the different sizes of babies. Now, it is incredible to think that by your 3-month mark, when the baby is got pretty much everything it needs, scald fingers and toes and all of that stuff, you're still only looking at something between a boiled egg and a light bulb. Very small, but it's incredibly important that we understand that the development of babies and how they develop over time. Okay, now let's move on. We're going to talk finally about 2 parts of the fetal development kind of idea, which is amniotic fluid and the placenta. Now, initially, the egg survives off its own nutrients stored inside of it, some nutrients given it by other cells, and eventually, when it implants, it takes nutrients directly out of the uterus. Thing is, once it gets above a certain size, the fetus can't absorb nutrients directly from its environment. It's like you lying down in a vat of jelly and hoping to absorb it. It doesn't happen. So the baby needs another way to get nutrients and oxygen from its mum. And this is by the placenta. Now the placenta is an organ and it's actually grown from the baby's own cells. So when the baby is growing, some of the cells become the baby itself. Some of the cells, the unlucky ones if you like, kind of group themselves together and form this thing called a placenta. Now, I'm not going to show you a picture of a placenta because some people, I promise I wouldn't show anything gory, but they're very interesting to look at. They're basically large bags of blubber, and they attach themselves onto the womb, onto the uterus, and they form a connection with the mother's blood. Now, in the placenta, the mother's blood and the baby's blood come very close to touching and mixing. They don't quite mix, but very close to a very small membrane between the mum's blood and the baby's blood. And across that membrane can go nutrients and oxygen from the mum and all of the waste products from the baby. So some people say, well, is the baby not constantly drinking its own poo from this fluid it's sat in? Well, no. All of the waste products do end up going into the placenta and into the mum's body, and eventually she'll end up peeing out the baby's pee, if you like, and pooing out the baby's poo. Now, of course, it's not really poo from the baby, it's just waste products, but it all gets added to the mum so that she loses all of that stuff herself instead of the baby losing it. Now, this is how the baby gets its food, and it all goes along this thing called the umbilical cord, which you've probably heard of, but the umbilical cord is attached to the placenta, and the placenta is attached to the uterus. Can you please take down these notes? You need to know this. And then the final point I want to touch on is amniotic fluid. Now, the baby is not just sat in an empty bag. The baby is actually sat in what we call a sac, S-A-C, of amniotic fluid. Now, amniotic fluid is made of loads of different stuff, but broadly it's kind of a custardy almost consistency. It's quite relatively thick liquid, which surrounds the baby continually. And remember, the baby doesn't have to breathe, so don't worry about it being surrounded by liquids, because it's getting all the oxygen from the mum via the placenta. So it's surrounded by this liquid. Now, the point of the liquid is, let's say, I don't know, a woman is standing on a tube train, and somebody jostles into her, bumps into her, or maybe the tube train stops suddenly, and she kind of knocks herself into a pole, one of the poles on the tube train. If you've been on one before, I'm sure most people have. What you don't want is for the baby to be directly underneath the skin. Because if you think about it, if you ram yourself into a pole, you give yourself a nasty muscle ache. If you ram yourself into a pole and you've got a baby under your skin, you're going to crush the baby. But that doesn't happen because the baby is surrounded by this fluid. Picture yourself inside of one of these large plastic balls. They're called Zorb balls, or whatever they're called. But it's filled with custard. And then picture someone trying to punch you through this ball. It's not possible, really, for them to hurt you, is it? Okay, because all that's going to happen is they're punching this ball of custard that you are inside. A, you won't be very happy because you'll be breathing in custard. But B, you can't get hurt by the punches. It's too absorbent. It'll just flex out of the way. Same thing here. It is possible for the baby to be hurt. It's much more difficult because even if the mother, I don't know, is in a car accident or something like that, this fluid should protect the baby. And that's the point of the amniotic fluid. It protects the baby. Can you please, again, take down these notes? Fine. That's it. That's all we're going to do today, gents. That's it. Now, I'm going to be finishing off next time by talking about some issues around drugs and pregnancy. But for today, what I need you to understand is, firstly, what fertilisation is. Secondly, the kind of general ideas, the stages of human fetal development. Thirdly, what amniotic fluid is. And fourthly, what a placenta is. If you've got those four things, you've got today's lesson. And I hope it's been very interesting for you. Got any questions? As always, contact your teacher, or if you want to, you can contact me. Have a great day. Looking forward to seeing you all back in school, hopefully in the next few weeks.